Good morning and welcome to the Peace River, Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority Board of Directors meeting of May 27, 2020. Let the record show all commissioners are present. If you wish, please rise for the invocation delivered this morning by Commissioner Elton Langford, followed by the pledge of allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for a wonderful day and a beautiful day, Lord. We thank you for this precious rain that you've been sending us over the last few weeks, Lord. We thank you for that. And Lord, we just ask that you give this board the wisdom and knowledge to make the decisions today that would best suit the constituents that we serve, Lord. We thank you for our men and women in the armed forces and at home, Lord, our law enforcement, fire, EMS, all of our first responders, Lord. We lift them up to you. Pray that you keep your hand of protection upon them as they do their best to protect us. Lord, we thank you for all that you do and ask all these things now in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Ask Commissioner Mayo has something to share with us this morning. So.
Yes, I thought we'd start the meeting off with some good news. You know how heavily involved Peace River was in the purchase of the Orange Hammock, 5,776 acres. And we just got word that the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast they were charged with raising $1.5 million to add to the $19.5 that the state is going to use to buy Orange Hammock, and they met it just in time, but nevertheless, they raised it from a lot of different people, and they've raised that money. So it appears that we're good to go, and that in the next little bit of time, the state will put their $19.5 million in. So if you pass upon anybody from the Gulf Coast, the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast, give them a big thank you. You get to meet any of the donors, many of them stay private, but nevertheless, this is a big deal. And remember, Orange Hammock, all that acreage is contiguous to our facility. Our western boundary is Orange Hammock's eastern boundary. So this is a very, very big deal.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Commissioner. It is great news. Okay, folks, it's now welcome guest time. With everybody with masks on, I think I know who most of you are, but I'm going to ask each person, like we normally do, to go around the room, introduce who you are and who you're affiliated with.
Good morning, my name is Stephanie Ishii, and I'm an engineer with Hazen and Sawyer.
Good morning, Katie Judy with HDR. Terry Holcomb with the Authority.
Richard Anderson with the Authority.
And me with the Authority.
Kevin Morris with the Authority. Richard LeBlanc with HDR.
Tom Haid with HDR.
Bob Dune with HDR. Tim Kramer with Stantec. Doug Robeson, ESA with the Stantec team.
Tim Curran, AECOM.
Morning, David Cash, Sarasota County.
Joseph Jones, Sarasota County.
Katie Gilmore, Manatee County.
Mark Simpson, Manatee County.
Ryan Messer, HDR.
Morning, Craig Reedy, Charlotte County.
Gary Walker with Stantec.
Doug Ekman with TKW Consulting Engineers.
Julie Sullivan with ESA.
Dave Tomasco, ESA.
Scott Todd with HDR.
Sherry Swanson, HDR.
Aaron Hunt with HDR.
Chance Lauderdale with HDR.
Andre DiFapella, Hazen and Sawyer.
Jim Guida, Reservoir Resources.
Tony Janicki with Janicki Brown.
Bill Weber with Stantec.
Mike Mylan, Sarasota County.
Burt Warner, Desoto County.
Rachel Carson with the Authority.
Steve Swab, Reservoir Resources.
That's it. Very good. Thank you very much for attending this morning. Okay, County Administrator, Desoto County Administrator Mindy Hines is not able to be with us this morning. Commissioner Lang, would you have anything to add?
No, sir, I don't guess. Just to welcome everybody. And I hope y'all have safe travels over, safe travels back, and if you can find a place that got room for you, y'all are more welcome to eat here before you leave today. Other than that, I think we got everything's kind of opened up, but it's at probably 50% occupancy. So anyway, thank y'all for coming, and have a great day.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, we're at public comments. Rachel, did you get any emails? Anybody?
Yes,
Any cards? No cards. This is our public comment time. If you do want to provide some input, address the board on any agenda item or even non-agenda item, you need to fill out a card. This will be the last call for that. Okay, seeing no one rising to fill out a card, we're going to move on. Consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm not going to see if anybody wants to pull something.
sorry.
Commissioner Mayo?
No.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to pull 6, but can we have a motion to approve the balance?
That's fine.
Very good.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And it passes unanimously. Item 6 is just the ratify the FP&L Solar Together subscription. It came up at our board meeting yesterday, just a confirmation that if we should choose to leave this program, withdraw from it, or whatever, it would not affect our ability to ever do solar on the property ourselves. Mr. Nansen, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The agreement has a 30-day termination at will, so you give them 30 days notice, and then after that you can go forward and do what you wish.
I shared that basically at our board meeting yesterday, but I was asked to confirm it with our attorney. So Chair will accept the motion to approve 6.
Second. So moved.
Second.
We got a motion second to approve consent agenda item number 6. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Okay, we go now to the regular agenda. Mr. Anderson, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Richard Anderson. It's great to see everyone here, and great to know that my clothes still fit after 4 or 5 months of being in the closet, so that's good news.
I'm sure you
Item 1, as you know, is the water supply conditions update, and we've kind of, hang on one second, here we go. This is an information item only. As usual, I want to touch on the rainfall. As you can see, since our last meeting, the rainfall has kind of been a roller coaster ride for us, going back even to before the first of the year. But had good rains in February. We had no rain in March. We had a trace 0.01% in March. And then it kind of bounced back in April with almost 4 inches. Again in May, no rain through the 15th when this report was put together. Since then, as Commissioner Langford alluded to, we've had about 2 inches in the basin. So we're, as we sit today, we're about half of where we should be for May. So, but all in all, we're coming through the dry season, as you'll see, in really good shape. So all in all, it's been a fairly decent spring for us. As you can see, the river flows. Currently, right now, we're at about 135 CFS, which is just right at the normal spot, as you can see where the blue and the green lines come together, right where we would expect to be. No water to harvest at this time, but we are in good position when the rains do come to get that first flush in the river and start taking some good quality water. So, as you can see, river withdrawals, April and May, of course, nothing to take, nothing to harvest. So as you'll see, we've been relying on our storage for the last couple of months. As you can see here, the surface water storage started out full back in February. Started taking water out at a pretty good clip there, and then you can see, I don't have a pointer, but you can see where the line deflects a little bit. That's April 1st, where we started our ASR system. You can see how it deflects the line a little bit and delays our the point where we would not have storage available. So you can see here in a minute we've been able to deflect that a little bit through the spring. ASR storage, again, we started that April 1st. We plan on shutting that off here probably at the end of this week on June 1st. We'll have harvested about 500 million gallons out of that system to help augment the reservoir for the spring. So still plenty of water in the system, as you'll see here in a second. Days of storage, this is the available ASR storage, the usable storage, plus what we have in the surface water system. As you can see, the blue, the top bar, is our average day storage of 27.5 delivered. We have about 11 months of supply, 347 days. If you look at the contractual amount, 34.7, which is the red bar, we have just over 9 months at 275 days. And that's considering we're at the end of the dry season. So, as I said, we're in really good shape in terms of our supply. Looking at the production side now, as you can see for April, the authority produced over 31 MGD average for the month, which is quite high for us. The county and city facilities did just over 49 MGD. Total delivered was over 80 MGD for the system for the month of April. Of that, almost 4 MGD went to the consecutive customers of Manatee County, leaving about 76.5 million that went to the authority customers and members. When you look at Charlotte County, you can see they used 12, just over 12 from the authority, produced about 500,000 from their facility at Burnt Store, and totaled about 12.7 MGD for the month, which is right at 66% of your available capacity. For Desoto County, Desoto used 0.75 from the authority, produced another 0.3. They used just over 1 million, or about 74% of their available capacity. And Manatee County produced 38, almost 39 MGD, which is 75%, and that went to their customers only. They also produced an extra 3.7, which went to Sarasota, and 3.8 to the consecutive customers on the coast. Total production for them was 46.3, which again is quite high for the month. Sarasota County. Sarasota used 16.2 from the authority, which is 108% of capacity, but that's considering the work that's going on currently at the Carlton facility rebuild, so that number should be expected to drop here in the summertime when the rains come and through the fall when the work starts to get to completion. So another 3.8 taken from Manatee County and a little bit from the city of Northport, and then they produced about 500,000 themselves, total 20.6 used for the month. And finally, the city of Northport. Northport used almost 2 MGD from the authority, produced another 1.5. Again, they exchanged 170,000 gallons a day with Sarasota County. Total used was 3.3 MGD, or 54% of their allocation. And you can see on the regional scale, all these numbers rolled up into one. You can see for the red bar is the previous 12-month rolling average. So from May 19th through April 20. And you can see the jump there. We've had some quite high demands in March, April, and May in the system. And that's pushed our number up from 74 or 71.4 to over 74 MGD. So quite a lot of use. I don't know if it's because people are at home or cooped up this spring or what, but the the demands were up the last 3 months. And finally, the total use for the month, as you can see, we used 80.3 MGD. That left available 24.4, or utilization was just under 77%. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just at the risk of repeating what was already said, but I think it's important, especially for anybody that monitors our meetings. I know I give the number to the Board of County Commissioners in Sarasota County about once a month, but as we sit here on the cusp of the rainy season starting, we've got almost 13 billion gallons in storage between 2 reservoirs and the ASR wells, and people just turn the faucet on or whatever and just don't realize what it takes to get us there. So a big thank you to you all on staff and this board and all the previous boards. We are in just such great, excellent shape. I stare at the numbers and make sure I'm reading them right. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah, and I want to thank Pat. I appreciate the weekly reports too. That's been very, very helpful. With everything else, like we said before, everything else going on in the world right now, at least the people in this region don't need to worry about their water supply. And that is it's a wonderful thing, because I can remember the days in the 70s living in Fort Charlotte where that was not the case. It was terrible. Very good, sir. Good report.
Thank you.
Okay, our next agenda item, Commissioners, is Peace River Regional Reservoir number 3 project consultant selection. Carrie, you going to give us the ground rules?
I am. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Terry Holcomb with Authority staff, good morning. As part of the consultant selection process for the Regional Reservoir Project, the board elected at the January meeting to interview the top 2 shortlisted firms for the Regional Reservoir Project. We have today both firms. We have the HDR team as well as the Stantec team here to give us their qualifications on this project. Just real briefly, the reservoir project was identified in the authority's 2020 budget in their draft CNA plan, and it has been included and updated in our draft 2021 5-year capital improvements plan. It is a component of the Peace River facility expansion. It goes part and parcel with the phase 2 capacity increase. That project, along with the reservoir, is intended to provide 12 million gallons per day of additional storage to the region, or additional water supply capacity to the region. It's estimated that this first phase, the planning phase, the feasibility and siting study, is about $1.5 million. $250,000 of that was already allocated in the fiscal year 20 budget. The remainder then is split up between the authority and the water management district at $625,000 apiece, probably to occur over the 21 and 22 year, spanning about 18 months. And we're happy to say that SwiftMud has published their rankings, draft rankings of the projects, and this one is ranked high on their list. So just to kind of cover how we got here today, the consultant selection milestones, we started the advertisement first part of November in 2019. The submittals from the consultants were due beginning part of December. And then the Professional Services Evaluation Committee met December 12th. They elected to interview all 3 submitting firms, and the interviews and ranking were held on January 9th. There was a 1-point difference between those top 2 ranked firms. The board requested on the 31st to interview those 2 firms, and that's where we are today, May 27th, about 7 months later, waiting to hear from our 2 top teams. So each team will have 20 minutes for their presentation, and that'll be followed by an opportunity for the board to answer, to have questions and answers. HDR, we're going to go alphabetical. We'll present first, and then followed by the Stantec team. And we are asking for professional courtesy. As one team is presenting, we just ask that the other team move out to the lobby area. We've got Rachel Kirsten with authority staff who will help that transition, the consultants coming back and forth. So with that, if the board has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them prior to our introductions with firms.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay, let's go.
Great, thank you. We'll ask HDR to bring their team up first, and then Stantec could wait out in the lobby. You could put them right up.
Terry, will you keep track of the time?
I know it's high tech, right?
It works. You're ready.
Ready? Good morning. My name is Katie Duty. I'm HDR Team's project manager for your PR3 project. We're really excited to be here today to talk to you about our approach for success on this project. This project is more than just a reservoir project. This is your opportunity to further your mission to provide reliable, sustainable, high-quality drinking water to this region. A successful PR3 project requires a partner that you know and trust to deliver the project with cost certainty. A transparent decision process that's going to engage the authority to make timely, informed decisions to meet your objectives. Reservoir design options that improve construction quality, reduce your risk, and save you money. And water quality and reservoir operations expertise to deliver reliable, high-quality supply every single day. We are a project team that you know and trust to successfully deliver this project. In addition to HDR, Hazen and Sawyer is on the team. They're currently completing your water quality master plan. Progressive Water Resources, who helped secure the cup that made this project possible, as well as Earth Balance, who's done the most recent work on the RV Griffin Reserve, and several other sub-consultants to help us with field and data collection, reservoir design, and construction expertise. As the project manager, I have several key folks here with me today. You'll hear from Dr. Stephanie Ishii of Hazen and Sawyer, Bob Badoon, who is HDR's Global Dam and Reservoir Practice Leader, Richard LeBlanc, who's the Deputy PM and Design Manager, as well as Tom Haid, our Construction Manager. And this local team is backed up by a depth of resources to bring you the right solutions on this project. This HDR team has done the most recent reservoir work in Florida. The $500 million C44 reservoir and STA project that I personally have managed for 10 years is coming to completion. This local team is backed up by national experts that can bring the best practices and technologies from around the country. And equally important to all that is the work we've done with you over 15 years, including improvements to the Reservoir Number 2 outfall, as well as the Integrated Water Supply Master Plan we're currently completing. Our collaborative approach is going to deliver this project at a cost you can count on and full by 2030. That collaboration is with the authority's staff consistently day in and day out on project delivery. We're going to provide you, the board, with regular updates on how the project is doing and decisions that are being made, as well as cost updates so you can plan and account for your budget. And then there are key board milestones, such as transitioning from siting and feasibility to design, approving that step, and design to construction. We've broken our presentation this morning into the 3 major phases of delivery for this project, and we're going to start with siting and feasibility. Being able to make informed decisions during the feasibility phase is going to maximize the opportunity to reduce the cost on the project. Here are 4 key components that will need to be discovered and evaluated during feasibility phase, and by making decisions during that phase, we're going to be able to give you updated cost estimates prior to design even starting. HDR has a proven decision process that is going to support project decisions to give you the highest value project at the lowest cost. If you evaluate the benefits only, you may end up with a project that's cost prohibitive. Conversely, if you evaluate your costs only, you may end up with a project that's not going to meet your overall goals. HDR's tools and process we developed are going to give a framework to be able to balance benefits and costs for the best solutions for the project moving into design. By advancing the reservoir conceptual siting work that HDR did a few years ago, it's going to jumpstart the process and save money. There are numerous considerations as part of siting. One that you've heard a lot about probably is related to wetland mitigation. We have a holistic mitigation approach that's going to expedite permitting and overall reduce your costs. At your January meeting, you heard that purchasing mitigation bank credits for this reservoir might cost you between $13 and $39 million. We want to reduce that cost, and our approach starts with minimizing the environmental impacts first. Second, we want to maximize on-site mitigation opportunities. And third, we want to look to establish regional partnerships, similar to a project that we recently completed nearby. You might be familiar with the I-75 and University Parkway interchange project. We have a short video we're going to play that highlights details of that as it relates to your project in particular.
Whether it's growers working in sync or agencies coming together to meet a compressed schedule, the power of teamwork is priceless. When it came to the University Parkway project, considerable coordination was required to complete the environmental mitigation and expedite construction to accommodate the 2017 World Rowing Championships at Benderson Park. Like the authority's PR3 project, 2 watershed basins were impacted. HDR developed an integrated approach with regional partners to address the mitigation challenges and meet the compressed schedule. Securing multiple permits required strategic coordination with numerous agencies. Working with the Florida Department of Transportation, we were able to permit the purchase of mitigation credits from 2 banks, 1 in each basin. HDR partnered with Manatee County to develop a strategy to use the Duet Preserve as a mitigation creation area. We then worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service to satisfy the wood stork mitigation requirements at 2 of the mitigation sites. Our collaborative approach and innovative solutions allowed us to secure all permits in only 8 months and reduce mitigation costs by 10%. The sites today are delivering environmental and public benefits, a testament to the HDR approach and the power of teamwork.
So HDR's approach on looking to solve mitigation issues for this particular project was able to secure permits in 8 months and reduce the cost by 10%. And this approach is one we plan to bring to your project. We think there's some opportunities to do that. Another key component of feasibility and siting is related to water quality. Dr. Ishii is going to talk to us about how we're going to use water quality to inform our decision making.
Well, our team recognizes that water quality is a really critical element of this project for optimized operations as well as for system reliability. The withdrawal of preferred river water quality improves reservoir operations by minimizing algae blooms. That in turn benefits the cost of treatment and the quality of the finished drinking water. All of this allows the authority to simplify their distribution system operations and, most importantly, to provide your customers with a safe, reliable, and aesthetically pleasing drinking water supply. Lastly, the proactive consideration of water quality now is going to set the authority up to meet potential future regulations. So just as an example, let's consider how water quality informs intake siting. Our team has identified 3 potential intake locations which need to be compared across multiple criteria. But what I want to focus on is the criticality of striking a balance between water availability and water quality at each of these locations. So we can start to evaluate how these 3 different locations compare by using historical data from 2 existing USGS sites on the Peace River. As we move from red to green within the Peace River, we're moving away from lower and more variable flows and toward higher and more consistent flows. And for the authority, this means that larger and more frequent withdrawals would be allowed at these downstream locations if we were only considering the quantity of the water that's available. But we know that other factors also influence the usability of river water. For example, the total dissolved solids, or the TDS concentration, which represents the saltiness of the water. For TDS, we see that these red downstream areas of the river have higher and more variable TDS concentrations because of that coastal influence, as compared with lower and more consistent TDS concentrations further upstream. This is really important because the water treatment plant cannot remove TDS, but there is a finished drinking water TDS limit. So based on that limit, we see that water is more frequently usable at the locations near the existing intake as compared with further downstream. So effective intake siting has to consider river flows, TDS, and other water quality parameters at the same time. Beyond intake siting, water supply and water quality should inform how existing and new infrastructure are configured. Our team has developed the hydraulic model shown here to start to explore some of those configuration options, and I'm going to walk through a couple of them now, but all of these configuration options would be evaluated within the feasibility study. The first option is a pump station intertie that would allow the authority to fill both reservoirs 2 and 3 with either the existing intake or the new intake. This flexibility would strengthen the authority's ability to provide continuous service. Additionally, reservoirs 2 and 3 could be intertied by leveraging existing piping infrastructure. During startup, this intertie would allow for river water and water from reservoir 2 to be used for filling reservoir 3, and this gives the authority more control over filling, and it's especially important if river water was unavailable because of low flows or poor water quality. After startup, these connections would allow for withdrawn river water to flow in series from reservoir 3 to reservoir 2 to reservoir 1. This configuration simplifies operations and also benefits water quality by minimizing water age. Additionally, this configuration, coupled with water quality monitoring, would allow for algae blooms and other events to be managed. If the quality of the water in a given reservoir were impacted, it could be taken offline without interrupting service. That isolated reservoir could be addressed with the design decisions of the reservoir, such as aeration and mixing strategies, chemical stations, and boat access, which would allow us to address that isolated reservoir and then have it be brought back online. Our team is really looking forward to evaluating these configuration and siting options with the authority so that we can receive feedback from the authority and make decisions that provide reliability and cost certainty as we move into the design phase, which Bob is going to discuss.
Thank you. I'm going to be working with Richard, the design manager, on going through the design process. And we're going to be working to integrate the site investigations, the basis of design, and the mitigation strategy into an overall design development process. And the key to our process is going to be collaborating with you and your staff on making these key decisions, design decisions, as we go through the process. As Katie indicated, we will be updating our cost estimates at each deliverable phase of the work, and we're going to do that by using value engineering reviews and constructability reviews to inform our design and to confirm that we're on the right track as far as cost and design goes. During the process, we're going to be utilizing the latest in the standard of care and dam design, which is the use of independent expert panel reviews at each design deliverable to confirm that we're out using the latest in the standard of care in dam design and watching over safety. The design team will be coordinating closely with the permits required, as Katie discussed, so that when we get to the end of the design process, we're ready for a board decision to approve the project for construction, knowing that we have confidence in the design and in the construction cost estimate. With that, I'll turn it over to Richard to talk about the design.
Thank you, Bob. Our design approach begins with what Katie talked about, the understanding that this is more than just a reservoir project. With interconnected elements like the pump station, conveyance piping systems, and the reservoir itself, our team understands how to evaluate not only the impact of each one of those features on the other, but how it impacts permitting, construction costs, reliability, operability, and risk. As the design manager for the PR3 project, my focus will be to support the technical development of the project to deliver an integrated design to the authority. So what you're looking at now is the design cross-section of your existing reservoir number 2. Our team has developed several design changes that reduce the complexity of this design, reduce costs, and reduce risk to you. The first of those design changes is to eliminate the soil cement stair steps in favor of a flat plate soil cement to comply with current regulatory guidelines, just like we did on the C44 project. The second proposed change is to eliminate the geomembrane liner to simplify construction and reduce risk. So along with, it requires extensive labor and very time-consuming to install that geomembrane liner. So along with having to lay that material out and keep it flat during construction, considerable effort needs to be made to tie it into the cutoff wall and anchor it at the top of the reservoir. Additionally, with the geomembrane liner, you have to break your embankment construction up into multiple zones, meaning the contractor will have to build the middle of the embankment first, put down a drainage layer, come back, put down the geomembrane liner, and then have the earthwork crew come back out and then place more embankment material on top of that geomembrane liner. Again, it's a very time-consuming process, and it introduces the likelihood. So having removed the geomembrane liner, we propose a through cutoff wall to reduce seepage and allow for more continuous embankment construction, meaning you can construct the embankment first and then come back and place that seepage cutoff wall. This will help the flow of construction, and again, it'll reduce those risks of having potential construction defects associated with the installation of a geomembrane liner. Cutoff walls at similar depths are currently being constructed at Herbert Hoover Dike around Lake Okeechobee. To further reduce costs, our team proposes to reduce the size and adjust the geometry of the seepage drain system by compacting it and moving it further downstream. This decreases the total amount of expensive imported drain sand material you need to import to the site, and it allows for even more continuous embankment construction. So when it comes to maintenance and operation, Your staff has indicated that their ability to monitor Reservoir 2 right now is being impacted by a bacterial growth called iron ochre that's developed within the seepage drain piping system. And it's actually covering some of your monitoring equipment. So our team proposes to lower the seepage drain piping beneath the groundwater level, which is an economical method for reducing the likelihood of that iron ochre developed in drain systems. And this will allow your staff to reliably and routinely monitor reservoir number 3. Another maintenance and reservoir safety issue our staff is aware of is your staff's inability to access the seepage drain outfalls at various times due to lack of proper drainage around the perimeter of Reservoir 2. Our team proposes to design and construct a drainage conveyance system around the perimeter to allow water to drain away from those seepage outfalls, allowing your staff to visually monitor and access those seepage drain outfalls, which is a permitting requirement. The key to our design approach is to reduce the complexity of design and construction while still meeting the performance goals of the project, enhance your staff's ability to operate and maintain Reservoir 3, and reduce costs and construction risk, which Tom will elaborate more on.
Thank you, Richard.
So as construction manager, I'll bring our experience in construction of Florida reservoirs like C-44, as well as my personal experience with the Corps of Engineers to support Katie and Richard right from the beginning. For the field phase, I will select and lead the team that will represent your interest on the construction site. Prior to getting to the construction phase, my first priority is going to be to ensure that we produce quality plans and specifications that are clear, concise, and unambiguous so we can avoid construction claims. My second priority is to avoid the surprises on bid day that occurred on your Reservoir number 2 project. As Bob mentioned, we'll be updating costs throughout the process. We'll be using HDR's proprietary probabilistic-based cost model, which incorporates both risk analysis and the value engineering proposals that could save you money. When Barnard Construction finished Reservoir number 2, they came out to do my project in San Diego, which is a very dry environment. In describing your project to me, they said, "Tom, it was like building a sandcastle in a thunderstorm. We can't do anything about Florida weather, and if you don't treat it with respect, it will adversely impact construction quality. So the most important thing we'll do during construction is ensure that the proper materials are used for each of these features and that they're placed properly. Each of your 3 major features have common risks as well as unique project risks. I assure you that we will identify, analyze, and prepare with proper planning for those risks. As an example, for the pump station, we will work closely with the contractor to avoid these typical risks that avoid turnover." Katie?
HDR provides you, the authority, with cost certainty, with timely and informed decisions, with a reduced risk that's overall going to save you money on this project, and with your mission for reliable, high-quality supply every single day. HDR is proud of the partnership we've had over the last 15 years, and we feel we have the right team with the right experience that's recent and relevant to your project. We're eager to work on this, and we're committed to seeing it all the way through. And with that, we're happy to take your questions.
Very good. Excellent presentation. Commissioners, question, comment? Commissioner Mayo.
Well, just a couple of things. First of all, your presentation was well done. I used to train people in my old life to do public hearing presentations. Was that your, or did our staff, the interconnects between the future reservoir and the existing 2, was that your idea?
Yeah, the potential of how we might connect it are ideas we've took a look at the Reservoir 2 record drawings to see where we've got piping connections that exist. One of the important things about dams is to not cut into them and give them additional opportunities for risk and failure. And so we want to be able to make the connection between the reservoirs outside of your built reservoirs. And so by using some of the existing piping that you have, there's a manifold there that we can use. We haven't sat down to talk to staff about how that might work and how best to do it. That would be part of that first phase of the project. But it's a great idea to be able to keep it out of the embankment and adding an additional penetration into your existing reservoir too.
All right, and my last question, my second question and last one, is probably far too early, but do you really think you can achieve on-site mitigation in the few places that we haven't touched? How deeply have you looked into that?
So we haven't looked into the level of detail to confirm we could. We think it's going to end up being a balance where some of it might be able to be on site, either expanding the existing mitigation you have, but certainly the reservoir footprint and the intake, wherever that ends up going, is going to be too extensive of an impact to be able to say we've got it all on site. And so that's where our joint partnership idea comes in, where we sort of balance all of those. But anything we can do to pull that cost down and not just outlay a bunch of money for bank credits. The orange hammock you talked about this morning might be a perfect place to explore a partnership adjacent to. So it's not on your site, but we can do as much as we can on site first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trace, any questions?
No, listen to the other one next.
Good. Got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
As with Commissioner Mayo, I spent most of my adult life where you are right now, presenting at various projects across the United States and train people to do this. Y'all did a very good job this morning.
Thank you.
I'm very curious about your cost-benefit decision model and how that looks like. We have two places during the feasibility siting and mitigation selection where there'll be decisions made at that according to your schedule. Is that we will come in looking at the different scenarios and inform staff and this board as to what the options are on the cost and so forth?
Sure. So there's a few steps along the way. We have a couple different cost tools that help make decisions. One is what we call Econ H2O, and it takes project options. It takes the potential benefits of those, so looking at different places we might put the reservoir. What are the impacts if I put it here versus here versus here? Same thing on intake. And then compares it to the costs. And it lets us be able to figure out which is most important. Again, back to the idea of you don't want to just do what meets project goals or just do the lowest cost option. So that's one phase. We'll be working in a workshop format with your staff to make sure we've got regular input to that. So it's not something that we go off and work on and then come back and say, here's your decision, but it's really a collaborative process along the way with major board decisions to be made. So that's one cost tool we have. The other cost tool Tom talked about a little bit, and that's one, the ideas of it we can bring in during feasibility phase, but it really starts to come into play when you get to design and construction. And it looks at, rather than just going in and saying, okay, I'm going to establish quantities of some particular amount, I have a unit rate for it, and I get a cost, it goes in and looks at the risk and probability of some of those things. For example, I was talking with Tom last night about how he had a bid coming in and diesel prices were really high. And so what is the risk of a particular component growing in price or not having availability, and what is that impact? And so on Tom's slide, he had two curves that let you, so here's a cost estimate that's considered risk, how do we pull that in, how do we value engineer it? So it's two cost tools that we can use throughout delivery to help us hone in on the ultimate cost of construction.
You have a large team. Looking at your org chart, it's a large team. Can you define the primary division of service delivery between HDR and Hazen Sawyer? I mean, is there a line?
There's not a line. So the way we approach delivery really is as an integrated team. So if you go through the org chart, we have specific key task managers for various elements of the project. It's a big, complicated project, and we want people who are closest to the knowledge of delivering that responsible for that work product. And as project manager and Richard as the design manager, really responsible for making sure that it's all coordinated. But as a team, both with as well as our other sub-consultants, we function as one team as we partner with your staff to get the project done.
I also used to stand at the podium and say, you're also looking at the engineer of record for this project.
Yes.
Are you the engineer of record for this project?
No, that'll be Richard.
Richard?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. I think you'll agree it's much more fun being on this side.
a picture of that.
Did somebody already wipe it down? Thank you.
Do we want to leave these up here as well or not? Yes? I don't think we need it. Julie, do you need them up here? No. Okay. It's closed. Yes, we do. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Gary Wantland. I'm with Stantec Consulting Engineering Services, and I will be your project manager for this project. We are very excited to be here today. This is an extremely important and complex project, and we're here to present our capabilities and experience to demonstrate why we are the right team for the regional reservoir project. Our objective this morning is to demonstrate why we're the best choice, and also to demonstrate how we will communicate with you, the board, as this project progresses. As a way of a little bit of a plug, our team members have been involved in every major expansion project you have undertaken at this facility. They've all been successful, and we're looking to continue that record with you. With me today will be speaking, Mr. Tim Kramer, who will be my deputy PM, as well as Julie Sullivan from ESA, who will be talking to us about environmental permitting and some environmental issues. Water use demand is increasing, identifying an increasing need for drinking water supply. To do that, that requires an increased capacity for storage and management of raw water from the river to be able to provide that treatment and supply. But that implies changes to the intake system and a new reservoir. So there are several questions that come from that. Where's the right place to put that intake? Do we expand the existing? Do we site a new one? And what size should it be? With respect to the reservoir, where's the best location? And what do we do about the mitigation requirements that come with that? And then thirdly, how do we integrate these new components into your existing system? These are the questions we'll be addressing this morning. But the first step with that is going to be the feasibility study. Starting with some preliminary concepts, the authority, staff, and our project team will identify them and apply project criteria from project requirements that we develop together to screen those that have fatal flaws and remove them from the process. We'll then apply the owner's evaluation criteria from the point of view of what's too costly, what's too risky, and what doesn't look viable from an operational perspective. The final thing will be to apply a concept validation criteria, which are strategic selections, manageable from the point of view of the facility, actionable, as well as risk-informed and time-based. Those valid concepts will be taken forward into the feasibility study. Our study is intended to be an iterative process that achieves balance between the engineering functions, the environmental criteria and issues that need to be addressed for successful permitting, and the cost for the structure. We'll take the concepts that we validated and brought forward, and we'll build them into alternatives
for each of the different components. There's a river component, there's a reservoir component, there's an integration part with the piping. We'll build that into a system, and then we'll evaluate that system for viability. If it doesn't pass, we'll go back, modify it, and run it through the system again. The criteria we're going to use is whether or not this selection is operable. We'll look at whether or not it can be integrated into your facility and operate seamlessly and provide you the flexibility and resilience that you need. We'll also look at constructability, as well as cost and environmental impacts. Every feasibility study is to do three things. One is to define the project. The second is to identify the timeline for that project. What are the critical issues? What are the constraints that have to be dealt with? And finally, it needs to define the cost. The diagram I'm presenting to you now identifies an uncertainty in predicted cost for projects as the project proceeds. So at the feasibility level, there's certainly an uncertainty that we identify based on the advancement for Association for Cost Engineering uses this range at the feasibility study. There are many factors that impact and influence what that range actually, what that cost estimate is. It's a function of the project timing. Some parts of this job will be built 6 years from now. The reservoir isn't projected to start right away, but late in the time frame for the project. It's a function of the market conditions. Whether or not the contractors that we're looking at are busy or not determines how much margin they put in their bid. Whether or not the contractor perceives there's risks to the project, whether we as engineers have solved the issues and identified for them, or they have to do it themselves. That drives their bid and their money that they'll put in the job. It also depends on the availability of skilled labor and materials. We understand this process. Based on our experience of having done over 600 dams and reservoirs, just like what we're talking about here, we understand how these factors influence that cost estimate, and we will be able to provide you cost certainty for this project. Our approach to this job is going to be letting the engineering follow the solid science. It doesn't matter if you engineered the best pump station or the best reservoir in the world. If it doesn't match what the science says it has to do, like the river, understand how the river works, it won't matter. So our science will lead our team in understanding how the engineering has to happen. There are three parts to this job. There's the reservoir itself, how it integrates. There's the intake, how it functions within the river. And then there's the environmental permitting and environmental issues with that go with the job. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie Sullivan for a few minutes to talk to us about some environmental issues.
Thanks, Gary. Mr. Chairman, board members, for the record, my name is Julie Sullivan. I'm with Southeast Regional Director and Vice President with Environmental Science Associates, or ESA. As Gary mentioned, changing environmental conditions will impact water quality in the river system over time. This trend will affect the salinity and water quality and play a role in the evaluation and siting of the new intake. Even in the most conservative estimates, there's an increasing risk to suitable water availability at the current intake location. Specific to this river system and using data that our technical team members have collected for the authority for over 20 years, we're able to depict that risk. Using a proprietary model developed by our team member, this graphic was generated to demonstrate the percentage of time that the facility would be able to withdraw the permitted amounts. And as we move through future years, 2035 and into 2050, you can see an emerging trend in the availability of that water. With potential future reliability as low as 42% in this extreme scenario, site selection for the new intake is going to be a key element of the feasibility study. Given what we know about this system, the data we've collected for you over the last many years, discussions with your staff, we've looked at a number of potential sites. We've identified some possibilities based on a number of factors. We considered yield factors like water quality and availability, regulatory considerations related to the unique situation and habitats that the facility occurs in, and knowledge and studies that our team members have developed over the years to identify these options. We understand the importance of balancing all of these with key elements of constructability, access for operations and maintenance, and of course, project costs. It's our intent to refine these options through the feasibility study to ideally locate the intake. With the next key component we're going to discuss is the reservoir, so I'm going to turn it back over to Gary.
Thank you, Julie. So let's talk about reservoir design for a second. For the design of Reservoir 3, we will leverage the experience and success of Reservoir 2. We'll use the criteria that we set with the authority staff to identify the details that need to be provided for this new structure on your facility. And just to provide a shameless plug for a second, Reservoir 2 is the only above-grade off-stream reservoir within the state of Florida that has been designed once, built once, has had no major modifications, and has provided you, the board, 10 years of uninterrupted service. Your sister water management authorities cannot say that. One of the keys to the success of Reservoir 2, and the same key we'll use for the success of Reservoir 3, will be the drainage that's provided on the upstream slope under the erosion protection layer. That lack of drainage is what got Tampa Bay Water in trouble several years ago with their structure. Reservoir 3 will be designed to meet the needs we identify for how fast you use the water inside your structure, since that impacts the stability of that dam. So how will we find the best answer for the reservoir selection? During Reservoir 2, we used a proprietary program that Stantec developed called ResCom. That allowed us to evaluate the cross-section, the size, and the capacity of that structure to come up with the optimal value for cost per acre foot of storage. We've enhanced that model to ResCom 3. ResCom 3 now integrates not only the construction parts for the reservoir itself, but it includes the mitigation input we'll have from earthbounders for mitigation requirements, credits, debits, what's the best option to look at on a head-to-head basis with our different options. It includes the infrastructure costs for the pipelines that will be needed to integrate this facility into your facility. We'll also look at O&M and energy demand and put that on a head-to-head basis for comparison, so we end up with a life cycle cost comparison on a cost per acre foot basis. The output that we have from ResCom 3 will be used in the FAMS model for financial planning. This is a model that you have, and you currently already have a web-based application for that. So what we'll do is we'll take these different options, plug it into this model, which allows you to look at not only the cost, but your funding requirements, your funding options, and predict on a very clear basis what the impacts are to your constituents. That's the best way to provide this clarity and provide you cost certainty on what this project selection will do for you. The benefit to the authority and to the board is that we will provide this in a seamless fashion. Here to work with you to come up with what the best choice is for that. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Julie to talk some more about some permitting issues for the project.
Thanks, Gary. So, as Gary mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about the regulatory strategy and permitting for the project. There's really two major permitting components to the program as we see it for PR3. There's the permitting and mitigation requirements for the intake facility on the river and the transmission system, as well as the requirements for the reservoir siting itself. So, as I mentioned earlier, siting the intake is a key element of the feasibility study. The ideal location selected for this will balance the reliability of withdrawal, access for operation and maintenance, and overall costs. Our science team members have worked in this system for decades and developed much of the data and reporting that has been completed over that time. We have no learning curve. We don't need to develop, learn, research, or obtain the data or information. This saves you time and it saves you money. Further, our relationship with the myriad of agencies that are going to be involved in the permitting process is going to be key. Not only have our team members worked with these regulatory agency staffers for years, we have the respect of those agencies and their leadership that allows us to effectively negotiate some of the most favorable permit conditions for our clients. An example of where this is going to be key is in the development of a mitigation program for the project. As you've seen in prior presentations to this board from Earth Balance, our team member Earth Balance, there are going to be wetland impacts and potentially a lot of mitigation is required. Mitigation is expensive, so getting it right is going to be critical. This graphic simply depicts the general inverse relationship between mitigation, risk, and cost. There's a lot of different scenarios for mitigation out there. The less expensive options on the left side here often have more complex permitting and compliance requirements. while simple options like purchasing mitigation bank credits can be quite expensive. It takes specialized expertise to get the best solution that balances these factors, and this is something that we are known for. An example of this is the work we did in support of the first surface water facility on the St. Johns River for Seminole County at the Yankee Lake facility. Located in an aquatic preserve, it involves siting a new intake and transmission and permitting for a new facility. The project included 2 miles of transmission through floodplains in the St. Johns River, sensitive habitats and ecosystems that required a very complex mitigation strategy. We were able to employ a hybrid approach to the mitigation, do in situ restoration of the transmission corridor, avoiding mitigation for that entire length and saving the county over $1 million. We are proposing a multiple track permitting strategy. Our depth of bench and history with the agencies and program allows us to build on prior work. As I mentioned previously, we don't have a learning curve. This, along with our agency knowledge and relationships, allow us to run parallel tracks. This eliminates duplication of efforts, minimizes costs, and expedites your schedule. So as I mentioned before, our team has unmatched experience and history in the Peace River system. From the original surface water permit, the Peace River option in the 1990s, through our development and continued work with the authority's hydrobiological monitoring program, we have supported numerous environmental and regulatory efforts, some of which are listed here. In addition to the work we've done and continue to do for you, we have proven records with other clients in similar projects. For example, as trusted consultants to Tampa Bay Water, key staff were involved in the original siting and permitting of 2 surface water withdrawals, the Alafia River and Tampa Bypass Canal. Additionally, not only were they key in the development of the program of the biological monitoring, we still manage that to this day. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk about the team.
Thank you, Julie. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, I'm Tim Kramer. I'll be serving as Deputy Project Manager on this project. As Julie noted, our team was specifically chosen due to their extensive knowledge of the region and their years of proven history working for the authority. The team, made up of staff from Earth Balance, ESA, Janicki Environmental, and Stantrek, are trusted experts in their respective fields. Our team includes nationally recognized experts in water quality science, mitigation experts with experience in compliance, fast-paced projects, and unparalleled modeling experience in the watershed. Working in conjunction with our science team is our proven engineering staff. Led by Gary Wantland, our discipline leads Bill Weber, Dr. Christine Weber, and Doug Ekman were all intimately involved in the Reservoir 2 and the authority's previous expansion. As you can see from the slide, Stantec has assembled a large multidisciplinary team for this critical project. This team was specifically pulled together to bring local knowledge of your facilities, with almost half of our team being involved in the previous successful expansion. In addition to the identified staff, our organizations have a deep bench of technical experts to support the project team and the authority as this project develops. At Stantec, we have experience in managing large teams on multi-year complex projects, as we've demonstrated previously on Reservoir 2, and more recently as the design team for the Panama Canal expansion. We know how to utilize these teams effectively, managing staff levels to balance costs while maintaining the project schedules and budgets. Our Stantec team's experience with dams and reservoirs is unmatched. Not only has our team designed these facilities, but several of our project staff are credited with creating the current design standards utilized in the state of Florida today. Stantec has evaluated, rehabilitated, or designed over 600 dams and reservoirs. Many of these facilities are located right here in the South and Central Florida region. These projects include Reservoir 2, South Florida Water Management District Accelerate projects and STA 1 West, multiple mining projects, and the Army Corps of Engineers C-11 impoundment project. With that, I'd like to hand it back over to Gary.
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, selecting Stantec for this project eliminates your learning curve. Our knowledge and understanding of the science and the engineering that's required for a project of this type and complexity, we've done this before for you and for others. It eliminates the learning curve. Second of all, we will provide you cost certainty in our process. Using our tools and our knowledge, we can provide you certainty in how the cost develops for this project. And finally, using our understanding of the science and the project itself, we will reduce your risk for this project going forward. So with that, I'd like to show you a short video of one vision of what this project could look like, starting with an intake that's located north of the existing highway, with infrastructure that ties Res 2 and Res 3 into the new intake, going back to the back side of the facility. Depending on what we decide for the location of the reservoir, it could be located in any direction on the other side of Reservoir 2. And here we're showing that the piping goes to the new reservoir using the intake system that's similar for Reservoir 2, as well as the outlet structure that we have for the facility, a robust erosion protection layer on top, and an outlet tower that's similar to what we have for Reservoir 2. So then it ties back into the existing facility, showing how we discharge with emergency releases as well as total releases into an expanded treatment plant that we have for you. So, Mr. Chairman, again, this is a proven team that we have bringing to the table for you. We've been part of every major project you've done. We have the capabilities and experience to undertake this project for you. We have included key local staff, ESA, Earth Balance, Janicki, and TKW. We also have a deep bench of expertise and capabilities for this project, which we can scale to as needed to implement the project. Not only do we bring world-class experience, we also bring extensive Florida experience. And with that, I thank you and open up for questions.
Thank you, sir. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Start with Commissioner Mayo. No questions.
You don't feel like the new reservoir, you're going to build it exactly like the reservoir we have right now? You don't feel like there's much improvement, that it's a good sound?
Well, no, actually, if you remember what I showed you, and I can go back to that slide, we actually did show some difference in Reservoir 3's proposed cross-section. But what drives that is the key factor is the drainage, but also the criteria that the authority and we work together to establish. One of the key problems with a reservoir of any type is how fast you use the water on the inside. Because that creates a force imbalance on the upstream slope. And so what we're showing here is that we've moved the membrane close. So an option is move the membrane close to the surface, provide a very robust drainage system, and a robust erosion protection so that we allow for more drainage quicker. That eliminates concerns regarding the stability and promotes the safety of the structure. So we will apply whatever criteria is appropriate so that we end up with what works best for you. We're not going to cookie cutter Reservoir 2.
Thank
you. Mr. Myers, I'm good. All set? Yep. Very good, sir. Most of my questions were answered during your presentation. So
thank you.
One final question. I always like to look over at the podium, the individual at the podium, and find out if I'm talking to the engineer of record.
Yes, sir. You are.
Very good. That's the question, and I appreciate that answer.
Yes, sir.
I was in that role for many years myself, and it's very important that the client understands who the people are that are not just making presentations, but are going to have boots on the ground during the project.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
I am that person.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There we go. Thanks. That's easier.
Terry? They're all going to provide bats and ballots, or
Sorry?
ballots, something to score with. We do it that way. What's the process?
Sorry,
It's the recommended process.
I was in the recommended process, yes. So there's one or two ways you can go. One, you could start with a discussion about the presentations and your rankings, or another way to do it in more typical fashion would be somebody makes a motion, and then there's the point of this is to provide a ranking for the two remaining teams. So someone would have to make a motion to rank the two teams.
Well, let's have some discussion first, I guess. Two excellent firms, obviously.
I'll start on the discussion. I thought very good, but I don't think we can go wrong, which is always a good thing. My concerns are, number one, I personally am not the one that's going to be out there holding somebody's hand. This is a huge project. It's going to be over a long time. It's all about trust. It's all about working, being able to work with people. Mike, I would kind of like to know which way the staff is. If they have a problem or something like this, because y'all are the ones that are actually going to have to be working with these people. I always kind of like to know what they're thinking, which one. Was impressed very much with both presentations. I thought HDR was maybe a little bit more forward, but I also know Stantec's done a lot of work with the area. So you kind of go with somebody a little forward thinking, or do you go with someone that you know is going to do the job? I'm more, but it's still about personalities and getting along, in my mind, when you're picking somebody.
At this point, I think, if for a reference, I guess the staff input took place during the professional services evaluation. There was a ranking done then. So
they're fine with both of them equally?
That's why we're here, I believe. At both firms, but there was a ranking done at that point. But that's not really our role today.
Yeah, the two firms were 1 point away from each other. So
Okay.
then the idea was that we leave it to the board to make the selection since it was so close. But you always is the board's responsibility. Even if you receive a recommendation, you're not bound by that recommendation. You are making a final choice of which consultant to select.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll do a little more discussion. Perhaps somebody else to do a motion. First of all, it's very difficult. I have sympathy for the people that have to stand in front of us. And I'm sure we all had 4 poker faces. I've faced off in front of 9 poker faces. And you're trying to compress decades of knowledge and experience in the allotted time. I will tell you that HDR is what I would consider significant changes to the way the first reservoir, or the bigger reservoir, was done, was something that stuck with me. They were out front with significant changes to them. So I know Stantec suggested some changes, but that was something that I think was a separator between the two.
Commissioner Langford?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, reviewed the 8 items that we had for consideration, and like the rest of the board, I think that everybody, both sides have done an excellent presentation. It comes down to our decision. Basically, the staff throws it to us to either be the good guy or the bad guy, depending on which team winds up getting this. But I think it boils down to that they're all both teams are comparable. I think that both either or could do the project. But I have to agree with Commissioner Mayo. I did like a few of the things HDR talked about during their presentation that kind of sparked my interest. And with that said, in my ranking, I would have to put HDR engineering above Stantec based on what I just said.
Well, my evaluation, again, I thought there was some interesting innovation in the HDR presentation. However, when you look at the record of Stantec on the property, their national experience with this kind of a project, pretty strong. And when you look at the organizational chart, I thought I brought that up, at the end of HDR. It's very complex work chart with HDR. It's not unreasonable, but there's a lot to manage there. And there's 2 primary engineering firms, Sawyer and HDR in there, where if you look at the Stantec org chart, it's primarily Stantec personnel with their subs that they have. So I was looking at it from a simplicity standpoint, from a project management background, that it could work. HDR's team looked a very strong team and very good team. But I looked at the simplicity of Stantec, and that's kind of where I'm leaning, Stantec. Just because of their background on the property and the simplicity of the organization there. And I think that will help our staff. And quite honestly, when you look at the staff evaluations, Stantec, out of the 5 reviewers, got 3 votes. HDR got 2. Very close, but our staff did actually come out with Stantec on time. So that's why I'm sticking.
I like the experience of Stantec. I mean, that kind of, always like new innovation, but proven is proven. We know what we have works. So it's always, anytime you kind of go out and try something, it might be cost effective, then in the end, if you start having a lot of overruns and things to it, may not. I make a motion that Stantec be the number 1.
I'll second that. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Stantec being ranked number 1, HDR number 2, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Saying no? No. So we have a tie vote. I was concerned about that.
Okay, so the procedure is with tie vote, the motion fails. There is still the availability of a second motion and a revote, but at this point, we would not be going forward with the project if we don't receive, a 3 vote for the project. We would go back to replacing the project in the procurement process and redoing the ranking if we don't get a motion of 3 of you to go forward with the project.
I think we've been in this situation in the same building one time before. Just glad I ain't the chairman today. Well, I think we've got to a place here where someone's going to have to change their mind, or like Doug said, we're going to have to go through this process again. I would like to make a motion to accept HDR Engineering Incorporated. And the reason being that I feel so strongly about that is I understand what you said just a minute ago about Stantec, but I also know that HDR's got had a lot of different players, as you said, on the team where Stantec has a group of people that's all been there, done that before too. But I've also found that just in life in general, a lot of times it takes a lot of different heads at the table to come up with different ideas. And there's a lot of times that the boss man that actually calls the shot, a lot of times if he would listen to somebody down the food chain a little bit, it might have turned out a little better, it might not have turned out a little better. So that's kind of why I was leaning more towards HDR, is they do have a lot of people affiliated with them that's going to be coming in with different ideas and doing different things from the presentation that I seen. So that's why I lean more towards the HDR Engineering Incorporated over Stantec. And I also like the somewhat change to the design that they were talking about on the reservoir, I believe that you mentioned. They come with that up front, throw it on the table to help with that. So I know there's always a different way to skin the cat, so to speak. And so that's why I lean towards HDR. Nothing against Stantec, but we have to make a choice one way or the other here today. I believe it would be in the best interest of us to make that decision today. And therefore, like I say, the 8 items that was in consideration, I think they both met those qualifications. But I just, for whatever reason, I lean more towards the HDR Engineering Incorporated. So with that, I'll make a motion that we select them.
Okay. We have a motion from Commissioner Langford for HDR being ranked number 1. Do I have a second?
Second, and I'll take some discussion.
Okay.
If appropriate. Look, they both were great. I did like the presentation and the examination of more thorough, I thought. But again, time is a constraint for both parties, and I'll look right at both of you. About the intakes and the cross connections and the change in design. I will tell you, sitting in this very room, and I was sitting in the back, in my old life, I was here when I was absolutely flabbergasted that after successive votes, it was reduced to Mr. Mason, Doug Manson, doing a coin toss to decide.
I was in the audience.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the team that I was on happily was the successful coin toss, but I hope that's not what happens today. And for that not to happen today, I leave it to two of my friends here to vote differently.
Let me be clear, that's not part of our procurement policy anymore. There will be no coin toss.
All right, great.
All right. Commissioner, we have to kick this around. We have a motion and a second for HDR being number one. You know, I certainly don't want to have to go back out on the street again. That would just be not good for the authority, would not be good for anything. We've already had lost time. Like I said, my main concern was the structure of the team, not the qualifications of the team, just the complexity. And I wasn't convinced that was going to run as smoothly. However, it could, certainly could. The innovation, the interconnects with the reservoirs, that's what I meant by the innovation, and I was very impressed with. No question about that. The subtle changes from Res 2 to Res 3 from Stantec, in my opinion, are rather subtle. Wasn't as dramatic as HDR. But I'm still hung up. So I'm going to depend on staff to really look, because we wouldn't have brought it to us unless you felt strongly about number 2 could be number 1. I mean, that's why we're here. So I'm going to switch my vote. We need to break it loose. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion for HDR to be ranked number 1 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Let the record show it passes 3-1 with Commissioner Trace dissenting. We have moved forward. Congratulations to HDR. Congratulations to Stantec for a great presentation. We're moving ahead.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Manson, on this issue?
No.
All right. Number 3, acquisition of Project Prairie facilities. Does anybody need a break? 5 to 10 minutes. I'm all set. Very good.
Mr. Chair, board members, Mike Coates of your staff. This is Project Prairie acquisition. This is regular item number 3. If you recall at the January 31st board meeting and workshop, we talked about this in some detail. Excuse me. And this is a follow-up to those discussions. It's focused on the steps to move forward with that acquisition, including an interlocal agreement between the county and the authority for that purchase. What you see here is a shot of the Project Prairie facilities that we're talking about. In the background is US 17, and up toward the top right-hand side is north. If you could look down below this picture, you'd see the Walmart distribution center. These facilities were completed in 2005. The authority owns already some of the facilities here. These facilities circled in the blue. There is an RO building currently used for storage, aeration system, a clear well, and an emergency water supply well that the authority owns at this location. Desoto County owns a 5.5 million gallon a day high service pump station, a 500,000 gallon storage tank, a generator, emergency generator, and chemical feed system on location. This facility currently takes water from the authority's regional 20-inch pipeline, the Desoto 20-inch pipeline that goes south on 17 and takes it in. They boost chlorine residual, and it's pumped back up into the Desoto County system through a 16-inch line that goes north on US 17. This is located at a strategic point in the system. You can see on the left-hand side here, the Project Prairie site. We connect with that with the Desoto 20-inch line, the 24-inch Phase 1 pipeline also connects into that site. Of course, that pipeline isn't operational right now, but it will be in just a couple of months. And then, of course, Desoto County's 16-inch line comes out of there. So the location here, of course, not only supports Desoto County, but it has the potential to support the region by moving water north and south in these regional pipelines from Punta Gorda north, from our facilities at the Peace River facility south. We have a number of future projects identified on this east side on our old well field in the future in Desoto County. Excuse me. And some additional supply development down at Shell Creek. So again, strategically located in the regional system. In December, we had Stantec, one of our engineering consultants, do an evaluation on these pumping facilities. They went out, took a look at them. They inspected the as-builts. They looked at the operational and maintenance records. They found the facilities to be in very good condition, well maintained. And based on an investigation, they came up with a valuation for this Desoto County component on Project Prairie at about $749,000. So how would we propose to fund that acquisition? Well, this table shows that there are adequate funds in the Phase 1 interconnect project to fund this acquisition. You see the total budgeted funds on the top line for the Phase 1 interconnect, state, Punta Gorda, and SwiftMud funds, total $12 million. See, as we get down into the construction of the Phase 1 pipeline, we've already used up all of the state money, that's $4 million. We expect to use all of the Punta Gorda money. And for SwiftMud's money, instead of $6 million, we expect to use about $4.8 million of that. So there will be money left over in this project to fund the acquisition of that project, the Project Prairie facilities. And of course, this will require approval from SwiftMud. We have to modify the work plan. They have to approve the fact that we would like to buy this as part of the Phase 1 project. But this isn't new territory. We've bought projects in this manner before. In fact, we purchased a 5 million gallon storage tank out on Carlton during the Phase 3A project. Through the co-funding agreement, we also purchased about half a mile of pipeline from Charlotte County on the Phase 1A pipeline through the co-funding agreement. So we're not treading on new territory in this manner. So moving to purchase ahead is going to require an interlocal agreement between Desoto County and the authority. A draft copy of that, of course, is in your board packet. The agreement lays out the county's desire to sell and the authority's desire to purchase. It identifies the facilities to be acquired. It requires the development of an operational agreement that's essentially outside of the interlocal agreement that would be worked out between the authority executive director and the county administrator. That operational agreement recognizes that the facility is still a location for delivery of regional water to Desoto County, and this is an important location for Desoto County to boost residual and send that water up into their system. But at the same time, in the future, this location will move regional water north and south through the regional transmission mains. So Desoto County would continue to operate in the foreseeable future on this location, and that operational agreement codifies that. The regional acquisition of the facilities are required in the interlocal agreement to be complete by the end of this calendar year, and the interlocal agreement would expire in end of December 2021. Just a couple of other mentions. There are some provisions in the interlocal agreement that would survive that expiration date. One of them is the operational agreement. One of them is a dispute resolution section. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the next step would be to go ahead and have the authority board accept the interlocal agreement and send that to Desoto County for their approval. And the staff recommendation then is to accept the interlocal agreement between the Peace River Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority and Desoto County for regional acquisition of the project prairie facilities and send to Desoto County for approval. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions from Mr. Coates? Chair will accept the motion to accept the interlocal agreement between Peace River Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority and Desoto County for regional acquisition of project prairie facilities and send it to Desoto County for approval.
So moved.
Motion second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I gladly make that motion, and it's with the presumption that Desoto County is going to be in favor of it, that our staff has interfaced with SwiftMud, and that there's not going to be any problem with funds being used there for this.
We have talked to the Water Management District staff about this. They verbally said they're okay with it. We don't have anything in writing yet, but we do expect it to go forward.
And the agreement is contingent upon that, upon the SwiftMud approval.
Sure. Yes.
Your motion second to approve regular agenda number 3. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Number 4, 5-year capital improvements plan and 20-year capital needs assessment. Good morning, Mr. Morris.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board members. You have had a long morning already, but this is about the future, and so we're going to take just a few minutes to go through item number 4, and I have some video and some pictures for you, I think, that will help to convey the message. So this is about the future. It's about plans for the future, and one thing we know about plans is they can change. And if I'm fortunate enough to be standing here in 3 to 4 years talking to you about projects, I'm sure some of the very projects I talked to you about today will have changed. Some of them will have been delayed. Some of them may have lost support and fallen to the wayside. There may be new projects. And then as we go through feasibility studies, we may find that some of the projects need to change in capacity or size or the routing of the various projects. So they change. And the further out we go, one thing is we know is true, the fuzzier the picture gets. Right? But Ben Franklin said, failing to plan is planning to fail. So we plan nonetheless. So just to reiterate the purpose of the feasibility studies. The feasibility studies that we undertake are intended to get us information we can use to get to the go, no-go decision on projects. It's a fraction of a percent of the total project cost. More than 99% of a project's cost is involved with property acquisition and conventional engineering and construction of the project. But that feasibility study work up front is very, very important. Neither the CIP nor the CNA that we're going to present to you compels or locks a member into paying for a particular project. The only thing that can do that is action by this board, along with interlocal agreements that are then approved by the customer boards. So with that, I will move ahead into our presentation, I think. Oh, I was going backwards, sorry. All right, so we have 18 projects for you in our booklet today. 2 of the projects are continuing projects, and they will finish in this next, early this next fiscal year. The filter covers and 3B regional interconnect project will both be completed. The costs of the projects range from as low as $1 million to as high as $242 million. Very important to this process has been the fact that we have updated cost and project definitions from the work associated with the 2020 Integrated Regional Water Supply Master Plan update. So we were able to plug in revised costs and project scope information. So we have the projects broken down there. There are 4 water supply projects that you see in blue. In green, we have 10 regional transmission projects, and we have 4 system-wide benefit projects. We're going to talk about each of those categories briefly. So for water supply projects first, we have about 35 million gallons per day of current allocation. And over the next 20 years, we're planning to add another 20 million gallons a day of allocation to satisfy the region's growing needs. We'll accomplish this through 4 projects. Reservoir number 3 and a minor expansion of the Peace River facility is shown as that first step up, the S1 plus S2A combination, and that will generate 12 million gallons a day of safe yield. By 2028, we should have the reservoir complete, and sometimes it takes, depending on the weather, it takes a while to fill. So you see me talk about having it online in 2028, whereas Ms. Holcomb talked about filling it through 2030. 12 years after that, so that gets us a long way. 12 years after that, you see Project S4, the 5 million gallon per day brackish water RO unit. That will net us another 5 million gallons a day of safe yield. And then finally, towards the end, we see an expansion of the ASR wellfield A2, and that should net us another 3 million gallons a day of safe yield. So as we discuss water supply projects, and because you chose a reservoir consultant today, I've included one of my favorite animation sequences. This is the time-lapse construction of aerial photos taken of Reservoir 2 between 2007 and 2009. And although the construction only lasted 24 months, the construction timeline can be misleading. The timeline for Reservoir number 2 started in 2002, a full 5 years before we broke ground on the project, and 8 years before we finally had it filled. So just like a farmer that plants a citrus tree knowing he won't get fruit from it productively for 6 or 7 years, it takes a long time sometimes for the decisions like you made today to really bear their fruit. And in a similar vein, only one of the board members that initially chose the consultant for Reservoir number 2, and that was Shannon Staub with Sarasota County, was still on our board when we had finally filled it, right? But every single board member that we had after that, and all the various respective member boards, were instrumental at decision points along the way to get us to where this project could come to fruition. So Reservoir number 2 helped to greatly reduce the region's susceptibility to droughts, and it's a lasting legacy to the leadership by this board and our members' boards. And it reflects the vision, the commitment, and the chain of decisions that turn that vision into the reality. Now let's move to regional transmission projects. So in addition to the water supply, the transmission mains are critical to interconnect the production centers and convey water from areas of production to the region's demand centers. And what you have is a fairly busy graphic, but what it does is it shows you that we currently have 76 miles of transmission mains. We will complete phase 1 later this year. That gives us 76 miles. Early next year, we'll complete phase 3B. That gives us 81 miles of transmission mains. And there are another 72 miles of transmission mains planned over the next 20-year period, getting us out to 2040. So that gives us 153 miles of regional transmission capacity. There's also embedded in that chart that's shown before you are 5.5 miles of pipe that either must be relocated because of highway projects or replaced in that period. I'm going to share with you some videos we took just this last month of the Phase 3B pipeline work. These are 50-foot long segments of 48-inch diameter steel pipe. They are staged for the construction crew. The pipe comes from American Spiral Welds pipe location in Columbia, South Carolina. That's about 100 miles inland from Charleston and about halfway between Augusta, Georgia and Charlotte, North Carolina. These pipes were shipped by stacking them 3 sticks to a truck, and they arrived in convoys of 8 to 10 trucks. So we received about 1/4 of a mile of pipe at a time. The pipes themselves, each one of those sticks represents about $10,000 of material cost, and it cost us roughly another $6,000 per stick to install them. This is some 36-inch ductile iron pipe that was staged along the National Cemetery property near Clark Road. This video was taken 6 weeks ago. All that pipe has since been installed. It's underground today. This is an accelerated sequence installing the 50-foot long segments of pipe, and you can get a sense for just the challenge of trying to steer something that long. And a 50-foot trench box is truly a formidable piece of construction equipment. You get a sense there of looking at the equipment and the workers, why it costs $6,000 per stick to install. Right. Now that pipe is all welded internally. There's a welder inside that welds every seam. Inside it is then coated with a cement mortar lining to protect the weld. Outside it has a heat shrink wrap. A very well engineered system. This is the 3B pipe, and again this is speeded up just for the sake of expediency. And you get a sense they're using 20-foot long sticks, so they're able to lower them in to the trench box in the manner that you see and push them home. And when they slam that pipe into that joint, there's a dull ringing. It's like a bell in the distance is rung. It's quite impressive if you're standing right there. So system-wide benefit projects, we have 4 system-wide benefit projects. And the top one shown in the upper right is the Filter Covers project. That is currently about 40% complete. We are very pleased with that and are looking forward to showing that to people on tours, and also bringing maybe at a future board meeting when we have time some video of that project going in. The next project in the somewhat middle there is refurbishment of the reservoir pump station and that sheet pile wall. Those facilities are all 45 years old. Portions of the sheet pile wall have failed in the past, and we have repaired them. So we're looking to rehab those facilities. The third project is to replace the building where our water resource and construction groups are currently housed. We're in a 50-year-old hunting lodge that we converted in 2027 with Swiftmud's permission, so we're looking to build a dedicated building for that group. And finally, at the very bottom, we have raw water ASR. We had hoped to have that one underway already, but we've run into, as you are probably aware, some permitting and regulatory issues with that. Right now, we're hoping that we can have that completed by 2030. And of course, the benefit there is we could save up to $1 million a year in operational costs, as well as reducing the amount of sludge that we produce at our plant if we can get that project underway. The next 2 slides are just location maps, and I blew up the labels so that you could perhaps see them, but they're still fairly small. There's 2 panels to this. There's the northern half of the region and the southern half. The legend water supply projects are in blue. transmission projects in green and system-wide benefit projects in yellow. For the northern half, this is most of Manatee County and the northern half of Sarasota County, we only have transmission system projects planned in the northern half. Phase 3B is actually shown on both panels because it's right at the overlap. I'll go to the second panel now, the southern half, where more activity is taking place. You can see Phase 3B. Existing pipelines I made black. I didn't know what other color to use. Hopefully you can see that we're extending from the existing network that we have. I've called out each of the various transmission projects in green. In yellow, you see the system-wide benefit projects. They're all there at the Peace River facility. And then the water supply projects are either at the Peace River facility or on the R.V. Griffin Reserve. You can see we've sketched in just an example of where the future reservoir may go next to reservoir number 2. So this is a schedule graphic that illustrates how all these projects are sequenced in time. The first 2 projects, again, are the continuing projects, the filter covers in Phase 3B that we will complete in fiscal year 2021. The next 5 are all shown commencing with feasibility studies shown in purple. Not every project requires a feasibility study. Some of them are more straightforward. This graphic summarizes the 5-year CIP. The chart on the left summarizes the flow of funds and shows a steadily increasing cost over the period, with about 1/3 of the total expense being offset by projected matching cooperative grant funds from the Water Management District. We're projecting a total expense of about $75 million and over the 5-year period, with about $24 million offset by the Water Management District. The pie chart also breaks down the projects by the composition or the type of project, and we can see that about 68% of the expense is related to transmission projects, and then the work associated with the reservoir and the minor plant expansion then makes up the most of the balance, with some of the system-wide benefit projects in there as well. This next slide is the 20-year period, and you see a marked rise in costs as between 2026 and 2028, we are at work completing the construction of the reservoir number 3, the minor plant expansion, as well as 4 major transmission mains, 40 miles of transmission mains during that period. And then you see costs decline fairly rapidly until they're negligible by 2030, and they stay pretty flat there until 2035, when we start to see a sort of balanced mix of transmission and water supply projects to take us out through the rest of the period. The pie chart at the bottom reflects more of a balanced assessment of about half of the projects are water supply and about half are transmission, and the remaining 2% or so is system-wide benefit projects. The total for the 20-year period, we're looking at an investment of about $630 million, and we're anticipating about $293 million worth of offsetting grant funds from the Water Management District. So just to summarize those last two charts, just really briefly, 5-year CIP, we're looking at about $75 million. Forecasting cooperative grant funding of $23.7 million. Over the 20-year period, $630 million roughly for the CNA, and $293 million of offsetting grant funds. So this is the plan that we have developed, and we shared it with your staffs using Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Skype during the quarantine period for the last many weeks. It's consistent with the strategic vision. It's consistent with the master plan update, and it's consistent with our best understanding of the challenges facing the region. This slide relates the recommendation from staff to you today for board action. I thank you for your patience and your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Kip. Any questions?
so sure it's a question. I thought it was a great job, Kevin, thank you. And I love, you have to plan out 20 years, but I think we need to also be conscious that, I know Manatee County, we're not gonna need any water, we're projected out till 2038. So I wanna make sure that we don't start building regional transitional lines or need the capacity until we actually need the capacity. I think we need to plan, know where we're gonna get it. But I'm not so sure building, because you can build stuff early and the next thing you know, someone decides to put a road through it, and then you're gonna have to move all the lines. So I think we need to work with the staffs and everything to make sure that we are using, that we're getting the capacity when we need it, know where we're gonna get it, which is what we're doing with the reservoir, but realize that, if we have too much capacity and we're not ready for it, that's just gonna cost the members, each person more money, and the water gets old in the reservoirs and stuff. So I know a lot of those transmission lines are going through Sarasota and the cost and everything. And like I said, I know we're 18 years out still before we see that we need it. And the plan does change, because we were set to start getting water, I think, in 2011, and now we're saying 2038. So I think we just need to make sure that we realize we need to make sure we move as a need also. Plan, yes.
Yes, sir.
Just one quick question. I think it's way out there, but I saw in your graphic, Laurel Road. We're not doing anything right now with moving those big transmission lines, are we?
No, sir, we're not, but we do recognize that forces at play seem to be leading in that direction. So we're trying to plan for it in case it comes through.
And I would just tell you that it's being spoken about privately, Venice City Council, Sarasota government, and I think a decision will be coming, but not right now. And you might want to continue to interact with those jurisdictions, because there might be a possibility that that pipe doesn't have to be moved, because I think any scheme that's now being thought about is not widening the entire length of Lowell Road anymore, just the portion of Lowell Road from Knights Trail heading east to Jacaranda Boulevard. So I'm sure you're staying plugged in, but that is a moving target right now.
Yes, sir.
I think the one thing we have seen is, in the last 3 months, is you think you know what's going to happen, but you have no clue what can happen.
There you go.
So, once again, planning is always good, but need to kind of not really pull the trigger till you need it, in my opinion.
What's your pleasure, Commissioners?
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
A motion is second to adopt the 5-year capital improvements plan and 20-year capital needs assessment for the period 2021 through 2040. Any additional discussion?
No, sir.
Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And that passes unanimously. Okay. Item number 5, 2021 budget issues. Folks.
Mr. Chairman, board members, Mike Coates and your staff. If you'll recall, again, at the January 31st budget workshop, there were a number of budget issues that we discussed. And I want to kind of revise those, tell you where we are with including those in the fiscal 2021 budget. And as we go through those, if you have any questions, we'll take them in sections. If you have any questions or comments, just break right in and ask. Specifically, the 4 budget issues for discussions are these, and these again were talked about at the January 31st meeting. Renewal and replacement sufficiency, and that's based on a recently completed study by Black & Veatch. The local funding component of the 3 feasibility studies that we submitted to SwiftMud back in October. We need to come up with the money, if SwiftMud's going to come up with the money on those. establishment of a disaster recovery reserve for hurricanes and other natural disasters, and also the results of the financial rate model done for the authority by Stantec, which recommends an increase in the fiscal 2021 water use rate. So let's talk first about the R&R sufficiency study. Recognizing that we already have a large and growing list of assets that are critical to producing and delivering water to our customers, last fall we tasked Black & Veatch with developing an R&R sufficiency study for the authority. They evaluated more than 1,000 assets that the authority has, most of them out of the Peace River facility, but also including the pipelines. They spent a great deal of time at our site. We met quite a few times and talked about all this. And they put together an R&R sufficiency study based on what they found, the physical nature of the assets, and the best management practices in the industry. This is a roll-up of what they found. So the R&R sufficiency study was coupled with an asset management tool developed by Microsoft called Microsoft Power BI, that's business intelligence. And what you see on the screen in front of you is the hallmark of the Power BI intelligence program. It's the ability to create a dashboard that gives you a condensed view of the information, lots of information in one shot, essentially. So in this case, we cataloged, again, 1,000 assets. We looked at the condition they were in, how much longer they have for lifespan, what the projected useful lives would be, how much it would cost to replace or rehabilitate those assets. Some of the assets just get replaced. Other assets like storage tanks, clarifiers, concrete structures, those sort of things, get rehabilitated and can be rehabilitated quite a number of times before they have to be replaced. That's all considered in here. The screenshot looks out to the year 2100, and it reflects over $400 million in projected R&R expenses that may be expected within that time frame. But much of those costs are associated with replacement of pipelines. Since 80% of our transmission mains are less than 20 years old, we really don't have to concern ourselves too much about that. That's 30 to 50 years in the future is when those costs would begin to hit. So our focus really is on the next 5 years, and the Power BI tool is informing us that on average we need to be spending about $4 million in R&R per year to keep things in good stead. In 2020, the 2020 budget, the R&R contribution was $2.2 million. The fiscal 2021 budget includes an increase to $3 million in R&R spending. And subsequent budgets are proposed to increase that amount gradually to get to the recommended $4 million by 2025. We're also proposing in here, as we consider updating our strategic plan this fall, that we revise the strategic plan to include an element in the plan that would have us review this R&R sufficiency every 5 years. To ensure that the investment that you've got in these facilities is protected and that they remain reliable in a reliable condition to meet your needs. So that is the R&R portion of it. Again, it's included in the budget, the tentative budget, up to $3 million this year. Were there any questions on that part of it?
Commissioners, any questions on the R&R?
No, sir.
I just a comment. I appreciate the increase. We're doing the same thing at Charlotte County Utilities, increasing our budgets, going up to, I think, it's about $6 million So yeah, it's one of those things that unfortunately over the years we've not budgeted for. It catches up with you eventually. So, very good.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the list is the Cooperative Funding Project's local match. We have 3 feasibility studies under consideration for SwiftMud co-funding for fiscal 2021. And those are shown here. The Reservoir Number 3 Siting and Feasibility Study, the Southern Regional Loop, which is that Phase 2 and Phase 2C project that Kevin showed you in his CIP plan. And then the Regional Integrated Loop Phase 3C project, which would advance the regional system pipeline up to connect with Manatee County. Those 3 feasibility study projects budget total about $2.5 million. We are expecting $1.125 million from SwiftMud, and all 3 of the projects have been ranked high by SwiftMud and have actually been moved for approval into their draft budget. So SwiftMud, it looks like, assuming they approve their draft budget, will fund these as long as we come up with the local match, and the local match is about $1.357 million. Project locations are shown here. Again, feasibility study at the new reservoir. It's going to consider siting, location options, size and mitigation requirements, all associated facilities like the river intake that was talked about earlier, operational consideration, time frames and costs, transmission main feasibility studies, similar information from those, particularly time frames and costs. And all of this information is really critical because as we get to the point where we need to move into design and construction, we do that through an interlocal agreement with people who want to participate, with our customers that would participate in those. It's in all of our best interest that we have the best information, the most current information available to put into those interlocal agreements. And so that is why we propose moving forward with these. So because these feasibility studies are the last step in the planning stage, we've recommended in the tentative 2021 budget that they be paid for in the planning assessment portion of the budget. And you see on the screen the budget policy for the planning assessment is cost allocation based on population. All 5 of our customers pay a pro rata share based on their population percentage of the total regional population. That's what the board has adopted as the customer planning assessment. So the planning assessment for the current fiscal year, you see in that kind of orangish color on the left-hand side, $325,000. And of course, you see all of the projects that would go into the planning assessment, those 3 feasibility studies, and 2 other projects that were in there and have been in there for the past couple of years. One is a cooperative work with the Polk Regional Cooperative, and the other is a One Water initiative. Those remain in there. The feasibility work for the 2 pipelines is expected to begin in fiscal 2021 and go through fiscal 2022. The feasibility study for the Peace River Reservoir would begin actually this year and go into fiscal 2022. But what you see is that we've projected the fiscal 2021 costs. The customer assessment total would be about $625,000. For 2021, we're projecting about $600,000 in 2022. We tried to level the load in here. We, I think it's helpful. It doesn't, hopefully doesn't give anybody rate shock. So we leveled the load between 2021 and 2022. You can see the estimated SWIFT-MUD funding down below there, $575,000 in 2021 and $550,000 in 2022. So those are what we're looking at for the costs. Now, the allocations we're looking at broken out by customer. You can see the planning assessment and the pro rata share in 2021. Of course, that is compared with the current budget on the far right-hand side, the assessment in 2020. So it's a relatively large jump from the current assessment, but if we want those feasibility studies to move forward, this is what we're proposing. So with that, those have been included in the planning assessment in the fiscal 2021 budget, this distribution. Are there any questions about that?
Commissioners, any questions?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Disaster Recovery Reserve. Of course, our location in West Central Florida puts the authority and our member governments in really all the same position this time of year. Hurricane preparedness and to position ourselves to quickly recover from any damage associated with storms. Our member counties have reserve policies that specifically recognize the seasonal potential for storm damage. Some call it a fiscal stabilization reserve or a disaster recovery reserve. But these are all reserves focused on expenditures associated with damage from major storms or unforeseen disasters. Target amounts for the reserves vary. Some of the customers use operating expenses for a certain number of days, others a percentage of their total budget, others have a fixed number. And so we're really following the lead of our customers in developing this disaster reserve for inclusion in the budget. In 2004, the eye of Hurricane Charlie went directly over the water treatment plant, so we know that these events can happen, they will happen. The tentative 2021 budget that you're going to consider later includes an allocation of $150,000 toward that disaster recovery reserve with a proposed $1 million target for that reserve, which would be built incrementally over subsequent years. The draft language for that reserve policy is shown here and is, of course, similar to previously mentioned member government reserve statements. So that is the disaster recovery reserve proposal that's going to be in the budget. Any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Question.
Go ahead.
How much did Hurricane Irma actually cost? Cost us out of pocket, so to speak. I mean, that's the latest one we've had.
Hurricane Charlie.
Or Charlie or Irma.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how much it cost us. I wasn't here.
Well, I just know we have one because the debris pickup is huge, and you do not get the money from FEMA for a long time.
Right.
I mean, at least that's why we're starting. And I just know y'all have what reserves for 180 days, kind of, with the reserves that you have. I mean, I think $1 million's okay, but I just don't know if you need too much because I assume most of this stuff is insured. So it's just actually how much out of pocket do we need?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was here during Hurricane Charlie, and it was something that you don't want to relive again. And you're right, FEMA can be great, but it takes time. So when we first got to the facility, no water to be had, and we were able to change the valves and keep Charlotte going. Diesel became a factor. People with cash could get diesel. It was on the market. We went all the way up to Boston to get some diesel. You could get it from FEMA, but it would take a week to get it because it was going to other critical areas. So it is I can absolutely tell you, you need to have some reserve funds to pay immediate responses for things like diesel, power, other supplies. And yes, insurance would reimburse some of it. FEMA, absolutely, we worked with and got some of that. Immediate expenses were priority.
I assume you have a generator, don't we already have one for electrical?
Yeah, we do now. At that time, we were back in 2004, before all the expansions, that we were generator shy.
How big's your I mean, I would assume you have a pretty big diesel tank, don't you?
Yes, we do.
I mean,
and,
so
but I can tell you,
how long can you run before the diesel goes down?
Our calculation now is we try to keep 10 days, but I can guarantee you Murphy's Law will somehow spring upon you. And
I think $1 million is probably about right. I'm not sure we should go much over that. I'm just, you know, we need a bigger diesel tank if we see sometime, those. Got one of those myself. Just a second.
Any other comment? I think it's a good start. We have a fairly significant fiscal stabilization, on our ad valorem budgets, and we hope we never have to use it again.
Yep, hopefully so. Okay, the last item on the budget issues presentation is the use of rate projections from the Financial Analysis and Management Systems model, also called FAMS, that Stantec developed for the authority. And here's another one of these dashboard shots. The staff from Stantec has been involved in rate modeling for the authority for many years, and this model and its predecessors have supported the authority for about a decade now. The Stantec staff provided a demo of this model back in January, if you recall. And this is a screenshot from the use rate portion of that FAMS model. The result shows a projected increase in the use rate per 1,000 gallons delivered for fiscal 2021 from our current 76 cents per 1,000 to 79 cents per 1,000 gallons. So an increase of 3 cents per 1,000 gallons at an average use rate by the customer, the end-use customer, of about 4,000 gallons a month. That represents about 12 cents a month increase to them. That increase to 79 cents a 1,000 has been included in the tentative fiscal 2021 budget. And that's it for the budget issues. If you have any questions on this or any of the other issues, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Commissioners, any questions on this, on the integrated rate model, or any of the other issues? Sufficient direction, Pat?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now go to the tentative budget for fiscal year 2021. Mr. Lehman.
Good morning. It's still morning. It's a pleasure to be here and see all the smiling faces, and even with some of us got haircuts, so it's a new day. And it's my pleasure today to be able to present the tentative budget to you. You solved some of the big issues just a few minutes ago with Mike. In fact, you solved a lot of big issues today and really set the stage forward for the future of this organization. And now we move on with the tentative budget to keep that going. The budget, of course, meets our mission and vision statement, that we make sure that we supply the 4 counties with a reliable, safe, and secure water supply. And certainly our budget looks forward to doing that. You can see where we are in the timeline. At May 27th, the tentative budget, with the public hearing will be August 5th in Charlotte County, along with the presentation of the final budget. As Commissioner Trace stated, over the last 3 months has been a time of forecasts and models with pandemics, with what will be the future financial soundness of the area. And now we have hurricane models to deal with. So we have a lot of models and forecasts. The bottom line, This budget has to maintain the what-ifs and make sure that we have the responsibility, both legal and moral, to have a reliable, safe, and secure water supply for the region. We have many documents that we have to abide by, including the interlocal agreement, master water supply contract that everybody's a party to. The prior board set resolutions on rate setting. We certainly have to abide by our bond documents and budget policies and the strategic plan of this authority. Looking ahead, that the master water supply contract provides for 34.7 MGD that we are obligated contractually to supply. Whether you use it or not, we're obligated to supply and obligated to make sure we budget appropriately for that. Customer demand projections are submitted every January. You can see that approached 33 million gallons a day by the projections received this year. It is certainly incumbent upon us to have efficient and effective operations of the infrastructure and to plan not only for the current supply for next year, but also that we have adequate long-term supply infrastructure for future water demands, maintaining the financial stability in our bond rating, and maintaining reasonable water rates. We don't want to have a rate shock to anybody. So as Mike showed, we do have Stantec rate modeling to help us try to levelize any rates so that we're not looking at just next year's costs, but what lies in the near term and the 5 and 20-year term. Bottom line, looking at a summary of the critical budget analysis of this year, the water rate, base rate increases, we proposed approximately a 3% increase. As you look at what Richard presented in water demands, there's been a steady increase approaching 2% annually. So that pretty much tracks that along with proposed potential population increases. The member fee has a small increase in charge to it. This is the first year where we've actually owned the building. So we have gone this year through the transition from being a renter to ownership. So some of our historical costs get some people kind of confused when they look at it because there's a lot different situations now. Ann Lee has done a super job at transitioning from renter to us being a building owner and also a landlord. So some of those cost pockets have changed dramatically from the prior. Planning assessment, we just talked about to make sure that we meet our future long-term needs. Looking at the staffing levels, we proposed in a 4% increase. That was what was discussed with some of our members a few months ago. We'll certainly be tracking that into the future as we approach August with changing scene of current situations. The health insurance, we piggyback on with Charlotte County. They provided us with an increase at 5%. We proposed one new staff position to help us meet a lot of it associated with our R&R needs. Investment in infrastructure, of course, that is the R&R that you just had the discussion, and those cost increases were embedded in this budget. And we also provide the funding within this budget to match our partnership with Swiftwood for the feasibility studies to meet the future water demands. And we also provide then, as we discussed, Mike discussed with you, to provide adequate reserve funds so that we have the assurance that we have a reliable, safe, and secure water supply. We are an enterprise fund, meaning we don't use the tax dollars by any means. We don't use ad valorem dollars. We are strictly based on water sales along with grant monies that we can secure. We are broken into two elements there, the administrative area, which is housed in Lakewood Ranch, and the facilities, which is, of course, is the primary cost center operating the plant facilities down at the Peace River facility, and also the technical services and construction services going on down at that site. Looking at the proposed budget compared to the current budget, you can see that there's over a $10 million reduction. That's because of the project costs. This year we have the big construction projects and pipelines ongoing. Next year will take a little breather, but as you see with the feasibility studies and the CIP program, that will bounce back up in a couple of years as we prepare for the future and time it out with the actual need for those infrastructures. This is a 5-year snapshot of our historical budgets, and you can see that the bottom orange, the O&M, as that reflects about approximately a 2% annual increase over the last 5 years, matching pretty much the increases in demand from populations. The non-O&M, which includes specifically changes in that, are R&R projects and other projects that are embedded year to year. The green, that's the CIP big projects. You can see there that there's differentials in years in the budget, primarily because of the project cost, ongoing projects. Looking at the expenditures, you can see O&M costs, of course, are the biggest chunk of it, along with the debt service, which is established. The project costs, as I said, are the projects, primarily the pipelines going on, also includes R&R projects. The county payments, and I'm proud, you're going to see a big reduction in that next year. For this upcoming budget, we will make the last payment on the 91 acquisition. So there will be approximately $1.9 million cost that you will not see anymore. We'll have a nice mortgage burning ceremony next year. I'm sure Charlotte County's smiling too on their side. The disbursements are bond coverage payments we collect every year and then return to our customers. The other costs are primarily the contributions to R&R that transfers to CIP that the board has approved, and the debt service coverage funds. Where do we get the money? As I said before, we're an enterprise fund, primarily water sales, so that is the biggest collection point of it. The CIP funds, which have been allocated and approved by the board for the project costs. Grant monies, thank you SwiftMud, and also the state. Other costs, and then the reserve funds. Those are planned reserve fund expenditures. They're not pulled out by emergency. Those are primarily the R&R and rate stabilization reserve funds that are planned to help fund the projects. And then, of course, the monies forward, which remain in the account at the end of the year in accordance with policies that we made 2 months availability in the general fund. How do we do these rates? We do have for the water sales itself. There's a 2-component with the base charge allocation, which is proportional to your actual allocations, and then the water use charge, which is billed on the actual metered water to each specific customers. We do not have a common rate. The debt service is allocated by those that participated and prescribed by agreement into each project. So there are a number of debt service areas that flux with each member are identified within the budget. And the fixed O&M, which is the unitary rate based on the allocations of customers by the contract. And here you can see how the 34.7 million gallons a day by contract is allocated. Charlotte County, Sarasota County are pretty much equal players nowadays. It's quite a change from 20 years ago. Desoto and Northport being the other players. And Manatee, hopefully someday in the future. So we look at the base rate, which is allocated out to our members. As I said before, this reflects approximately 3% overall growth from the current budget to next year's budget. You can see the steady increase over the years, which pretty much consistent with increase in water demand and increase in population by our member utilities. The water use charge is the actual charge per 1,000 gallons. Every one of our connection points is metered and charged specifically by the actual usage. We held it at 74 cents for a number of years. There was some flux in chemical costs at that time that allowed us to do that. These costs are primarily the cost of chemicals and electricity. So obviously there's a trend right now of inflationary costs and of approximately 3%, and the 3 cents is exactly what Stantec has proposed in their model, which reflects what Mike showed to you just a few minutes prior. Looking then at the proposed water rates specifically by customer, they flux a little bit between customers based on the debt services, the primary differentials in the base cost. You can see there that increases range from 0 increase for Manatee, that they continue to help fund for the potential use of raw water ASR, same as they are this year, up to approximately 3.5%, which would be Charlotte County's increase. And then again, a 3-cent increase for the actual water use charge. The member fees going up approximately 4% as we proposed. We've got a good handle now with the building ownership, the lease, our renter, and we're doing very well at getting that all worked out. That is split up, those costs, half of that cost is equal to 3 members. So we take half the cost and it's 25% to each member, you 4 members, not Northport, you 4 members. The other half is pro rata by population, and that has been set by board policy, so that's how those calculations come about. Looking at the management and planning projects and fees, which Mike discussed with you previously, it's just embeds within the budget exactly what he proposed, and showing that $625,000 for the tentative budget that we propose and how that's broken up by each member according to their populations. This is the tentative budget. We would recommend approval. We have 2 months until our August board meeting and public hearing. In the meantime, we've had discussions with your member staffs. We've submitted a lot of this information to your administrators. Certainly your board of commissions, we're more than happy to have discussions with. External agencies, specifically SwiftMud is one that we really work with, and the public. The public is instrumental in this. This information has already been posted on our website. We have an icon for the proposed budget, and once the tentative budget, we'll post it again and open for any public comment along with your staffs, your boards, and any other agency comments. So any questions or discussion? Mr. Chairman, I turn it back to you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions, comments? Okay, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the tentative budget for fiscal year 2021 in the amount of $51,267,201.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
A motion is second to approve the tentative budget for fiscal year 2021. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. And that passes unanimously. Next item, Pat, you've got is...
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is the actual rate resolution of the proposed rates, which reflects what you just adopted in the budget.
So I have a motion to approve Resolution 2020-03.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second to approve Resolution 2020-03, which is a resolution setting forth preliminary schedules of rates, fees, and charges for fiscal year 2021. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Commissioners. Of course, this being the tentative budget, the final budget, of course, things can come down, but this is the maximum amount it could be. Doug, any general counsel's report?
I have nothing to report.
Very good, sir. Thank you. Mr. Lehman, Executive Director.
Nothing new to report, but I certainly want to give a big shout out to the utility staff of the authority and our member utilities, which kept the water going throughout these last 2 months. They showed up at the flat sites on the pipelines, and they did a yeoman's job, and truly appreciated by the public that doesn't realize what it took to wash their hands at the time.
Thank you, sir. We have the routine status reports. Any questions, comments on any of that? Anybody? Board member comment? Mr. Mayo.
I'll just be very brief. You know, it's been a long day, and we got a lot accomplished, and I'm sure it was very stressful at certain points in time, but I do have a complaint because of the location of this monitor, and I lay it at the feet of the commissioner from Desoto County. For 95% of the meeting, I could not see Pat Lehman, and only at the end did I see his haircut, and he's actually much better looking than I remember.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Joyce.
I'm just happy to see everybody in person. I get a little tired of those Zoom meetings, as I'm sure you all are. You know, and I'm not real good with technology either, so it's good to see everybody.
Yes, sir. To address the concerns of my friend down there at the other end that's in the short chair, those chairs are like barber chairs. The next time we meet here, I'll make sure his is jacked up so he can see it.
I deserve that.
And good to see all y'all. And I look forward to our country getting back to normal as quickly as possible. With that, turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, it's been an amazing 2 months, 3 months. It's incredible. I know in our community, I've mentioned it during our meetings, how proud I am of our citizens, how they've changed their behavior. You know, this social distancing and wearing masks and all those things we've adjusted to. It's amazing. And I think overall we're doing very well as a region, but compared to some of the other hotspots in the country. So it is great to be out. It's great to see y'all. It really is. Our next authority board meeting and public hearing for the fiscal year 2021 budget will be, as Mr. Lehman mentioned, Wednesday, August the 5th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. at the Charlotte County Administration Center in Port Charlotte. Our future meetings, September 30th, 2020, will be at the Manatee County Administration Building in Bradenton, and December 2nd, 2020, at the Desoto County Turner Agri-Center Civic Center here in Arcadia. Seeing that we have no other business, Commissioners, this meeting is adjourned.
Good luck with the summer.
Yeah.
Mike, you want your item 11 back, or you?